Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Bowers, a member of the APHIS Advanced Leadership Development Program, ALDP Orange Team. And on behalf of my team, we'd like to thank you for joining us today as we present our Action Learning Project, Emergency Support Function Number 11, Strategic Planning. Before we begin, please note that there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If at any time during the presentation you have a question, please feel free to enter it here. We will answer all questions at the end of our presentation. Due to the Adobe Connect format, there is no audio method to ask a question, meaning you will not be able to unmute your phone and speak directly to our team. All questions must be entered into the Q&A box. Please note that no one else will see your question except the members of our Orange team during the presentation. So with that aside, let's introduce ourselves. This is a photo of our team. From left to right, you will see Clint McFarland, who's with PPQ in Worcester, Mass. Mark Prescott, International Services, currently stationed in Brasilia, Brazil. Myself, Kate Bowers with Veterinary Services in Harrisburg, PA. Todd Bayer, Veterinary Services in Riverdale, Maryland. Denise Conley with PPQ in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. Dave Ashford with International Services, currently stationed in Pakistan. Bill Flynn with MRPBS in Fort Collins, Colorado. And one of our ALDP learning assistants, Todd Sazdoff, also with MRPBS in Minneapolis, Minnesota. For our ALDP project, we've been working with two learning assistants, Todd Sazdoff, pictured previously, and Veronica Zabalia, and our executive coach, Bethany Jones, with LPA. Our two project liaisons are Ruth Lauder, the director of EMSSD, and Ron Walton, national coordinator of ESF 11. Before we dive into our project, let us take a moment to give you just a brief background about the Emergency Support Function Number 11, Agriculture and Natural Resources. Under the U.S. Department of Homeland Security National Response Framework, there are 15 emergency support functions that enable all response partners to prepare for and provide a unified national response to disasters and emergencies. Abbreviated as ESF 11, the Agriculture and Natural Resources ESF is managed under the USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS, as a primary agency. ESF 11 is comprised of four primary agencies: USDA APHIS, the primary coordinating agency, the USDA Food Safety Inspection Service, the USDA Food and Nutrition Service, and the U.S. Department of the Interior. ESF 11 has 5 core response functions in an emergency. They are to provide nutrition assistance, to respond to animal and plant diseases and pests, to ensure the safety and security of commercial food supply, to protect natural and cultural resources and historic properties, and to provide for the safety and well-being of household pets. This org chart represents the current structure of ESF 11 staffing within APHIS. This chart is from the USDA APHIS Concept of Operations in support of ESF 11 Agriculture and Natural Resources, or the CONOPS plan, as is referred to. If you follow from the bottom of the screen up, the ESF 11 structure is comprised of 10 ESF 11 coordinators located in the field throughout the country, one in each of the 10 FEMA regions. They are supervised by Regional Emergency Program Managers, or REPMs, one located in the Eastern Regional Office, who reports through the Veterinary Services Chain of Command to the Eastern Regional Board of Directors, and the other in the Western Regional Office, who reports to the Plant Protection and Quarantine Chain of Command to the Western Regional Board of Directors. Each Regional Board of Directors has between 5 and 8 members. The REPMs communicate directly with the ESF 11 National Coordinator, depicted here as the letter N, but do not directly report to the National Coordinator. The National Coordinator also communicates with the Liaison Officers, or LNOs, in Animal Care, PPQ, and VS, and briefs the Director of the Emergency Management Safety and Security Division, or the EMSS. The EMSS Director, in turn, briefs the APHIS Emergency Management Leadership Council, better known as the MLAC, which has 24 members. According to the ESF 11 CONOPS plan, all APHIS emergency program areas are accountable to the MLAC. So from this slide, you can see a top-heavy hourglass-shaped chain of command, where 10 individuals report up to 2 individuals, who then report to 16 individuals, who report to 24 individuals. There is no clear reporting chain when oversight is given by committees or boards versus one individual at the headquarters level between the national coordinator, the program liaisons, the regional board directors, and the MLAC. With that background, let's turn to our Action Learning Project assignment. In August of last year, when our ALDP team first formed, we met with our project liaison, Ruth Lauder, EMSSD Director, and Ron Walton, ESF 11 National Coordinator, and were given the assignment to develop a strategic plan for ESF 11 describing the mission, vision, organizational structure, and the operating process during preparedness as well as response. It was explained to us that an ESF 11 strategic plan was needed and should identify goals and objectives for the short and long-term performance measures. The strategic plan should also identify the review and update schedule for ESF 11 standard operating procedures and other ESF 11 products. With our assignment in hand, our team went to work. I now turn you over to Dave Ashford to explain our team's next steps.
This is Dave Ashford calling in from Islamabad. I'm going to take a few minutes to describe our initial approach and methods in responding to our project assignment. As Kate mentioned, we started with a briefing from our project liaisons, Ron Walton and Ruth Lauder, on the project objectives for a strategic plan for ESF 11. Based on that conversation, we initiated a set of interviews with ESF 11 employees and coordinators from within APHIS, using a standard set of exploratory questions and techniques we learned in our ALDP training. Our objectives in the beginning in these initial interviews was to further understand the perspectives on strategic planning among those working on ESF 11 within APHIS, or really to clarify what should be in a strategic plan and what was really needed. Based on those initial interviews within APHIS, we had some concerns about certain fundamental challenges within the agency regarding certain recurring themes, including clarity of roles and responsibilities of ESF 11 employees during preparedness and response, chain of command, agreement on just what activities fell under ESF 11 and who was the POC for each, and general coordination of communication related to ESF 11 management. Because of these concerns, we decided to report back to our project liaisons on these findings and seek further guidance on how to complete a strategy given these more fundamental challenges to setting vision, mission, and objectives for a long-term plan. Our interim report to our project liaisons included these initial findings from our interviews of ESF 11 staff and emergency coordinators from within the agency. We found that there is a lack of agreement in the agency on just what the APHIS roles and responsibilities are under ESF 11, or what ESF 11 covers in terms of emergency response activities and agency responsibilities. There's a lack of standardized procedures for rapid dissemination of information and communication. There's an unclear or complicated chain of command, which you just saw. And there are concerns about the efficiency of board and committee oversight of activities. And also, there was a lack of clarity of just what the duties were for the program liaison coordinators and some of the other ESF 11 employees. Based on those findings related to internal agency challenges, we came up with some interim recommendations in an interim report for our project sponsors. This is a list of our interim recommendations. We felt that a strategy could be formulated only after addressing some of these fundamental challenges in command and control, communication, and agreement on vision, mission, and objectives. We recommended that an operational plan addressing these challenges was needed, and a key component should include a simplified system of chain of command and communication. Basically, we recommended that the challenges we identified needed to be addressed first, and only then could a strategy be developed. The way to tackle these challenges we suggested was to bring agency ESF 11 employees together with stakeholders to reach an agreement on scope, vision, objectives, responsibilities, and then develop an operational plan and some standard operating procedures. Then, addressing those basic challenges, we could turn to a strategic plan or a longer-term plan. After presenting these interim findings and recommendations to our sponsors, we were asked to address 3 questions in further interviews in what we called a second round of interviews. These are the 3 questions we were asked to pursue. And we initiated a second round of interviews as a result, with an emphasis on including ESF 11 employees and emergency response leadership from outside the agency this time. We felt it was important to clarify our initial findings with those outside of APHIS, so we included the same standard exploratory questions in our second set of interviews with those external personnel involved with ESF 11 preparedness and response. Now I'll turn things over to Bill Flynn to tell you a little bit about the findings from our second round of interviews.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. This is Bill Flynn in Fort Collins. For Phase 2 of the interview process, we completed an additional 16 interviews, the majority of which were our external ESF 11 partners. This included DOI, FSIS, FEMA, FNS, USDA Forest Service, and the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Coordination. We also included a few more APHIS ESF 11 personnel as well. As David mentioned, for this round of interviews, we concentrated on 3 main data points of interest to our project liaisons and also inquired about internal strategic planning documentation that exists from our external stakeholders, as well as the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that each interviewee observed within ESF 11. With regards to the first data point, staffing, we found that our partners in ESF 11 generally dedicate only one of their employees to doing ESF 11 activities full-time. During periods of activation, they are able to pull additional resources from their existing staff as needed. These assignments are collateral duties and generally drawn from within their regions and only on an as-needed basis during an emergency response. Our ESF 11 external partners estimated that their collateral duty employees spend up to 25% of their time working on ESF 11 planning. This percentage can increase depending on emergencies that occur. They also reported that this 25% estimate of their time was on the high end of the scale and often felt that when not activated for an emergency, only 10% of their time was more accurate. As far as performance measures are concerned, the majority of the reporting during activation consists of conference calls that individuals participate in, tracking of funds spent, the ability to produce reports in a timely manner, and an itemization of services actually delivered during an emergency. After-action reviews seem to be the tool most frequently used to measure the success of an activation. The metrics during non-activation were quite variable and consisted of the number of trainings presented and attended, number of individuals trained, and the number of internal ESF documents reviewed. These performance measures were mostly self-imposed as opposed to prescribed by the agency, and there was a lack of consistency on planning and preparation work and uncertainty if it was even necessary. So where do our external partners see ESF 11 in 5 years? This question provoked a large number of responses and concern from our partners. Messaging, coordination, communication, vision, authority, consistency, and understanding were the overarching areas of concerns raised, and that there was a strong belief that these concerns needed to be addressed in order to keep ESF 11 relevant. Many individuals referenced the response during Hurricane Sandy, and if many of these themes were not addressed, they did not see ESF 11 in existence in 5 years. Here are some of the key findings that were discovered during our second round of interviews. Communication, command, and control structure needs to be reviewed. Some suggestions we received suggested having all ESF 11 staff come under SSD. However, others suggested leaving it as is. This needs to be reviewed to see which is more appropriate. Many partners are not clear on what other ESF partners do. For example, ESF 6 interviewees stated that they weren't exactly sure where ESF 11 and ESF 6 boundaries are with regard to animal care issues. The APHIS ESF 11 coordinators, the people in their expertise in the field, are a major strength. The folks in the field know their job, and their coordination seems to be pretty good. But then communicating to and with headquarters seems to be a challenge. And finally, regarding internal and external communications, this came up in the first round of interviews, and we heard this as a recurring finding during the second round. Now I'd like to pass it on to Todd Baer, who will discuss internal and external stakeholder perceptions and how they led to our recommendations.
Thanks, Bill. Because the interviewee list provided by our project liaisons wasn't exhaustive, it's important to remember that ESF-11 responders fall within a larger context of stakeholder interaction. The influence of and degree of impact on various stakeholders is depicted on this slide. And you can see that ESF-11 responders' impact and influence on the outcome of their mission is second only to that of FEMA and the President. Let's explore what the results of the 3 assigned data points told us. As a review, the 3 data points were 1, how many ESF-11 employees are currently working across the different relevant departments and agencies, and if these were full-time or collateral duties. 2, what are the performance measures that individuals collect and report on during activation and non-activation times? And 3, where do our external to APHIS partners see the ESF-11 program in 5 years? The people and the technical expertise of ESF-11 are the major strengths of ESF-11, especially ESF-11 coordinators in the field. We heard accolades of these coordinators' ability to execute critical functions again and again. Internal and external communication were the major weaknesses reported, along with the impaired functions which result from poor communication. Organizational structure challenges need to be resolved, and better coordination is needed for the flow of information. Challenges exist in understanding roles and responsibilities within ESF-11. There is a need for clarity of where we are and where we are going, stating that APHIS and its ESF-11 partners need to be careful about what they focus their resources on so that the ESF-11 mission is not lost. We had strong overarching themes in both the first and second round of interviews that bear sharing 3 paraphrases. One interviewee said, after Hurricane Sandy, there were a lot of questions about what was happening within ESF-11. There were often duplicate task forces present during recovery. Another interviewee said, ESF-11 partners see the need for clarity on authorities within ESF-11. During Hurricane Sandy, ESF-11 response did not allot them enough time to assess and stabilize the immediate needs of those impacted prior to moving into the recovery phase. Another interviewee said, I see the program going in one of 2 directions. Either all current staff will be collected under one manager in headquarters, or the staff will be located under the SPUDs and AVICs with a substantial reduction in headquarters staff. The last paraphrase that I'll share is, a clear vision and mission are needed to better define what ESF-11 has to offer before further development of an ESF strategic plan. That statement provides a nice segue to our next speaker, Mark Prescott.
Thanks, Todd. This is Mark Prescott from Brasilia. Let's move on to next steps. I think the logical place to start is with a ConOps. The ConOps is an integral part of the response capability. Fortunately, a significant document does currently exist. On the second page of the document, there is a description of what we do, but it also has a very open-ended portion of duties that we might do. From all of our research, it was made clear that a ConOps needs to be concise and clear, and not like the graphic here, where everyone is interdependent and does not have a clear understanding of their role. The current ConOps was written and signed in 2009. It states within it that it needs to be updated and signed annually, so it needs to be reviewed to make it accurate and reflect the current situation. And hopefully, while this is being done, some of the ambiguities that some of our interviewees described can be removed. The next step that I would like to address is the chain of command. Frankly, this is an urgent issue that needs to be addressed. It's currently affecting morale as well as the image and reputation of our agency. Some recommendations from the interviews, as Todd just mentioned, were either centralizing command under one person in Riverdale or matching FEMA regions and having people report to either the area veterinarian in charge or the state plant health directors. Having regional boards of 5 to 8 people or leadership councils of 24 members confuses things. Efficient and safe emergency response is dependent upon clear roles. What this means is something like this. And not something like this. So, to conclude on chain of command, the lack of a shared chain of command was the most consistent theme that we heard throughout all of our interviews. And lastly, as we are often deploying people in potentially dangerous environments, efficient and safe emergency response is dependent upon clear roles. And now I'd like to turn things over to Denise, where she will discuss how we can move, or you can move from where you currently are to having the strategic plan that you need.
Okay, thank you, Mark. The next steps I will discuss all lead to creating the strategic plan, and we have created a checklist for ESF 11 to follow. Some of the items have already been started or have been done through our learning project, and we'll have a check mark after them. Although our Action Learning Project tasked us with writing a strategic plan for ESF 11, we are putting that charge back on ESF 11 to write the strategic plan themselves. Clinton will go into further detail in the next section on that. The first step needed is for ESF 11 to contact a strategic planner. We spoke with 2 during our project and found them to be essential to this process. AFIP already has these employees, so let's use their skills. ESF 11 has a good starting point with their draft strategic plan and annex, which can be expanded upon. The draft, along with the program's functions, need to be reviewed to ensure relevancy to current management principles and administration priorities. All of the stakeholders need to be identified to ensure feedback is inclusive and buy-in is received. ESF 11 has already identified stakeholders through the 2 rounds of interviews, and additional stakeholders were identified with the matrix provided by Todd. For ESF 11 to be effective, the basic foundation needs to be set and clearly defined. This includes the stakeholders' needs, vision and strategy, and mission and values. If even one element is missing, the strategic plan will not work. Currently, there are these pieces missing. The current mission statement reads as, to collaborate internally and externally with federal agency and private sector partners to support local authorities, tribal territories, state, and other federal agencies during emergencies to protect the nation's agriculture and natural resources. Excuse me. The vision statement needs to describe why ESF 11 exists and what ESF 11 will do. Based on our findings, the duties are not clearly defined, which is reflected in the current mission statement. In addition, it needs to define what ESF 11 will not do. Once the duties are clearly defined, this should help clarify the communication and command structure. The current vision statement reads as, ESF 11 to continue to be the leader for federal coordination of support for agriculture and natural resources during emergencies and disasters. Maintain prompt and effective response for protection and recovery of agriculture and natural resources. Maintain the best, most effective, well-trained, and knowledgeable staff. If ESF 11 wants to continue to be a leader, a clear vision is needed to show where ESF 11 is going, or the current cloudiness is going to continue. The draft vision only maintains the current standards, which themselves are not clearly defined, but doesn't answer the question, how does ESF 11 going to become the agency it wants to be? Now that the stakeholders have been identified, the mission defined, and the vision clear, ESF 11 can set goals and strategies to address current issues and move to the place where they would like to be. The current draft annex to the strategic plan is a great jumping off point, along with the findings from our interviews to determine actions that are needed. It is essential to have timelines put in place for the actions as a way to measure success, which are currently lacking. In this lacking timelines, it will make it easier to put issues on the back burner. The timelines are needed to ensure some form of accountability and provide direction. The last and perhaps most important step is to ensure the stakeholders at all levels are aware of the plan and that you have buy-in. It is great if you have a plan in place, but if no one is aware it is there and should be followed, you're back at square one. If everyone is aware of the plan and using it, there should be clarity in duties and functions and structure and command. This will address the issues found throughout our project. I will now turn the presentation over to Clint for summation and reflection.
Thanks, Denise. This is Clint McFarland in Worcester, Mass. The answer that our team is presenting is not what was expected of us. Our team was asked to create an ESF-11 strategic plan for the EMSSD, and 7 months later, we have not produced such a document. However, we have outlined a plan to move forward so that an effective and appropriate ESF-11 strategic plan can be written. We did not come to this conclusion lightly, and this project was not without its trials. As part of the ALDP training, we learned about the practice of adaptive leadership, and this really resonated with the Orange team. This starts with the ability to assess a situation and differentiate between a technical and an adaptive challenge. A technical problem is a problem that can be diagnosed and solved, generally within a short time frame, by applying established know-how and procedures. Technical problems are amenable to authoritative expertise, processes, and cultural norms. An adaptive challenge is the gap between the values people stand for, how they subsist, how they're living, and the reality that they face, the lack of that capacity to realize those same exact values in their own environment. This is where the challenge lies. Approaching these adaptive challenges problems will allow ESF-11 to adapt to its environment. In order to approach these challenges, an adaptive culture needs to exist. The adaptive cultures exemplify the items listed on this slide. You've got to name the elephants in the room. You have to share responsibility for the organization and its future. Exercising independent judgment is essential. Developing leadership capacity, really institutionalizing reflection for everybody and the organization, and never stopping the learning process. Our team was tasked with creating an ESF-11 strategic plan, and our initial approach to the assignment was that of a technical problem, one where we could collect data, diagnose the situation, and apply a solution in the form of a strategic plan document. Only after in-depth diagnosis and much deliberation did we come to the conclusion that although we are technical experts within our fields, we could not place a technical fix to this adaptive challenge. Our team took time to closely examine our own understandings of the purpose of strategic plans as opposed to business plans or operational plans, and came to the realization that it is APHIS that needs to approach this adaptive challenge. APHIS, with input from their stakeholders, needs to clarify its ESF-11 role for FEMA and understand the expectations, limitations of its role, as well as create its own strategic plan. It is easy to understand why APHIS and its partners were tasked with the ESF-11 duties. We are the technical experts and the appropriate parties to conduct the emergency work. The Orange team has learned a lot about leadership skills throughout ALDP. We have come to the understanding that there is more than one right answer. Partnering is absolutely essential in leading. Clear communication is a must and has to be periodically reassessed, and that one of the ultimate stakeholders that we very often overlook are our employees. To utilize these skills and fully implement them has been tough, as it does involve a lot of reflection, but it also has been so beneficial to us and our work units already. So now we come to a way forward. We have identified many gaps in ESF-11 from the interviews that we conducted. This valuable information should be used to move the organization forward and not be lost. You need to create a solid mission statement and a solid vision statement before you can make a robust strategic plan that will work for ESF-11. We have outlined the steps to make this happen. You will need to review the command and control structure with an emphasis on streamlined communication. Lastly, there needs to be set timelines, and you need to hold each other accountable. Early in our ALDP class, we were receiving a lot of information on leadership tools and how they could be used. A question was posed to us at that time. It was said that our employees, managers, peers expected us to do nothing with these tools and this information. So the question was, what do we do now? The now is here. We believe that you should create mission and vision statements by the end of the fiscal year that are appropriate. Also, by the end of the fiscal year, you should identify the group that will develop the strategic plan from these mission and vision statements. This group should consist of ESF 11 employees from APHIS, OHSEC, DOI, FSIS, FNS. It should include the individuals doing the work and should include the stakeholders identified from our matrix. These individuals expressed interest to be part of the process during our interviews. They are excited about the process and really want to participate. So once again, the question is, what now? The Orange team would really like to express our gratitude for the opportunity that we received in ALDP. We really do appreciate it. And at this time, we would like to field any questions that you do have. The text box, the pod at the bottom of your screen is where you're going to be able to enter those questions. And once again, thank you. So we're still waiting to see if you do have any questions. Once again, you can place those in the box on the bottom of your screen, and we'd be willing to entertain any questions you do have. So we do have our first question here. Gwen Servies is asking, how do you deal with the challenge of having team members in other countries? And this was a challenge for us, as a couple of our team members are with international services. And I'm actually going to toss that to Dr. Mark Prescott in Brazil to answer.
Sure. I think that, thanks, by the way, for the question. You know, it is challenging being away, and I think that that's been one of the challenges of this ALDP session in general, is that moving from 2 sessions or 4 sessions face-to-face to 2 sessions face-to-face. And it's only further complicated by being in another country. But fortunately, you know, APHIS has supplied us with a lot of tools. You know, we have teleconferencing, we can do some video conferencing. And though it's, you know, not perfect, it has enabled us to go through the program and I think do a pretty good job and feel like we really learned a lot from it. And so, you know, I'll emphasize what Clint said at the end, which is we really thank the agency for investing in the program and investing in us and giving us a chance to do it.
Thank you, Mark. We have a few other questions here. This one I'm actually going to toss out to Dr. Dave Ashford in Pakistan. First, Ruth is asking, what time is it? And then also she's asking on the recommendations regarding the chain of command. If we centralize, how is the program support ensured? If decentralizing, how is consistency assured across the region? And Dave, I'm going to toss those both your way.
Oh, I'm, as far as time, I'm 9 hours ahead. But we have other members of the ALDP program that are around the globe, so we've had some challenges with time.
We've had some challenges with time. I'm 9 hours ahead, and we have other members who are in different places around the globe at different time slots, but we manage. The question about centralizing command in relation to program support is a little confusing to me, because it's not clear to me that the program support or budget needs to be linked to separate units. Now, that may be a challenge that has produced the separate chains of command, but that's not a good reason for separate chains of command necessarily. Would it require centralization of budget in relation to the ESF-11 activities, and in the case where we have ESF-11 employees who are primarily responsible for ESF-11, would they not be responsible directly through their chain of command as part of their performance review, and doesn't that solve the issues related to dual chains of command that we're seeing now, plus committees? So it's not clear to me that they're necessarily related issues. What we would have thought of as a solution would be centralization of program support through the new chain of command. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Dave. We've got a question here from Bethany Jones that I'm actually going to toss to Dr. Todd Baer. But at any time, did you as a team disagree on how to move forward when the initial results were not what you expected? And I think we can all answer this, but I'm going to toss this to Dr. Todd Baer.
Thanks, Clint, and thanks, Bethany, for the question, and also thanks for helping us along through the process, Bethany. You've done a great job for us. Certainly, we achieved consensus on the big issues at the time of the interim report, and we met with impressive solidarity, I thought, after resolving our differences. But there was always some constructive tension dealing with this many people who are carrying this many responsibilities around with us at all times, and learning our way through the different concepts that the ALDP program is for. So the creative tension was healthy, it was enjoyable, and we certainly had disagreement, and we learned from it. But the consensus was the reward, and I think that we're all together on the same page with all the content of the report that we just presented.
Thanks, Todd. I'm going to go to one here from Steve Weber. Did ESF-11 management and APHIS acknowledge your concerns, suggestions? And I know I'm picking out team members here, but I'm going to go to Dr. Kate Bowers for this one.
Thank you, Clint. Yes, ESF-11 management and APHIS acknowledge our concerns and suggestions. As far as our reception of the interim report and the interviews, all of our interviews were very agreeable, very helpful. Everybody wanted to put forward whatever they could, whatever input they could, and everyone was very receptive. We're very fortunate in that regard. And we're looking forward to hearing what ESF-11 is able to produce, hopefully between now and the end of the fiscal year, and see what steps moving forward are actually put into place. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. I think the last three questions that we just got up here are sort of around a similar theme. Craig Kellogg was asking, with the modernization efforts in PBQ, does the organizational structure issues outlined in your presentation get better, or do you see additional challenges? Beth Jones wrote here, APHIS has responded to and dealt with numerous emergencies with this current structure functioning. To change things up now, would that not cause more challenges? And the last one, just with technical to adaptive, how receptive are they to that? And I'm going to sort of field these three questions as one. We know that this has worked in the past. We have seen that it can work, and I think that, and from our talk today, comes from a lot of the people. The people. We keep seeing that the people are really a foundation for ESF-11, for APHIS, that they really have the skills, the knowledge, the expertise to do this, and the people working together, we often see that they can often complement. They do a very good job of that. We do look at now with some of the organization modernization stuff that we are going through, that this can fit right in. We think we're looking at streamlining. It's going to cause more challenges, but we think that they can become more efficient with looking at these things. Really, it has resonated with our team of this whole technical problem challenge versus an adaptive challenge and problem. I mean, the technical fixes, sure, it's going to make things work right now, and you can keep making things work, but to look at that further on how can we become more efficient, I think is the important thing here. There will be challenges, and it's not the easiest, especially when you start going through that reflection on how can we make things better, but I think it only makes it better for the future. It only makes us more able to adapt And I think that's the very important thing here. It's not that things aren't working currently, but how can they be and become better? And I think that's the important question to keep asking. And we just gave this report to our liaisons. Obviously, it's been the last 7 months we've been working on this. A lot has gone into this, and we really haven't taken this lightly, but we hope that people do see the merit in this data and what it can be used for to move forward. We did get another couple questions here. I'm going to go to Carolyn. How do you think the other departments and USDA agencies will think if APHIS tries to start making changes to the whole ESF 11? Will this have impact on the other ESFs? And actually for that, I'm going to toss that to Bill Flynn out in Colorado.
Thanks, Glenn. You know, actually, I think one of the recurring things that we heard from a lot of folks was that there was, since there was so much confusion as to what folks do, you know, trying to maybe, you know, make some changes around clarifying this would be actually pretty welcome. One of the things that we did see was that APHIS was pretty much the recognized leader for ESF 11. And so you know, again, trying to clarify this and trying to maybe streamline it a little bit might help that. The final question, will this have an impact on other ESFs? That's a really good one, and I'll go back to what I was mentioning previously about ESF 6. ESF 6 has some animal care types responsibilities, as does ESF 11. And one of the things that the ESF 6 gentleman spoke about when we interviewed him was, you know, again, just getting that clarity. Who's responsible for what? Who's responsible for service animals as opposed to household pets, as opposed to livestock, things like that. So I actually think that this is going to provide some clarity.
I don't know if we have time for any more questions or not, and I guess I'm asking that of our assistants.
We have about 2 minutes remaining for questions.
Okay. We did have one that popped up on generational differences, and then it went away, but I think we will attempt to respond to that. I'm going to send that to Denise Connolly, but the question pertained to, did we observe or witness generational differences between older and younger generations on maybe receptiveness, maybe on information coming in? And Denise, maybe you could field that.
Okay, Clint. I guess I didn't really notice anything different with responses from people based on generational differences. A lot of our work was primarily done over the telephone, so I don't necessarily know we were always aware of generational differences between interviewees and ourselves. That's just where I'm coming from. If anybody else on the team has something they'd like to add on that, feel free to.
Yeah, and maybe just to go alongside of that, Denise, I think that we do see differences generationally on how we can receive information, how we turn that around, and it's certainly a little different world now, but I don't think that we really saw anything on people interacting with the emergency situations or the mission or the charge that we're tasked with. I don't think we saw that at all. Reading on the question still up here now, I think Ruth just posted a comment, but saying the National Response Framework is being rewritten to address requirements from Presidential Policy Directive 8 and lessons learned from recent responses, which is great, and where we should be from what we heard in a lot of our interviews. Loretta Fields asks here a question, are the roles of the individuals clearly defined in this project? And I think I'm going to toss that back to Dr. Kate Bowers for that, of just maybe some of the individuals in ESF 11 and speaking to that, Kate.
Okay, I'm not quite sure if Ms. Fields is referring to the project, our project, or to the ALDP, I'm sorry, to the ESF 11 in general. Our recommendation was, of course, to be more clearly define the roles of each individual in ESF 11. Within our own project here, our team members working together with our learning assistants and our coaches, roles were clearly defined. I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry, Clint.
And I think that maybe we can end there, Kate, because that was a little ambiguous on that, but we definitely, at least within ESF 11, saw a need from all the interviews just to define where roles begin and end. And on that, we are out of time for questions, but once again, really appreciate the opportunity and want to say thank you once again this morning. Thank you.
And once again, congratulations, Orange team, and a great job on your Action Learning Project presentation. At this time, we're going to transition to the project liaisons. I'd like to introduce Ms. Ruth Lauder as well as Mr. Ron Walton to provide some remarks in response to the project this morning, followed by the executive coach, Ms. Bethany Jones. So, Ruth?
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank the Orange team. I think this was a very challenging project, particularly for people who aren't familiar with ESF 11 or the National Response Framework and APHIS's role in ESF 11. Hopefully, you guys learned a lot from it. I think from my read of your report, our discussions over the past 7 months, as well as listening to your presentation this morning, I think you certainly learned a lot from it. The information that you've collected fairly well parallels with information that we were aware of, and part of that was what led to the interest in developing a strategic plan. So it's kind of nice to have it all codified, written down, and identified by people outside of ESF 11 as what you see the issues are. I think part of my question earlier relating to the chain of command, we have sort of a very distinct tug of war that we've been working for at least the period of time that I've been at APHIS in terms of how we manage the ESF 11 resources in APHIS, with concerns that if we were to centralize all the employees either under one of the programs or within EMSSD, that we then would not necessarily have the reach back into the programs at the level of detail that we have and the level of support that we currently have. The other issue is that if it's a balancing act of trying to figure out how to best deal with the management of the resources at the regional level. Leaving them in the programs provides program ownership. I think we've done a reasonably good job of providing consistency across the regions because of the way that it's structured. And in my regions, I'm talking about the FEMA regions, vice the APHIS regions. We do have some differences between FEMA regions 1 through 5 versus FEMA regions 6 through 10. And then we're working on aligning some of those. The big concern that I do have with centralizing the structure is that if it is under one of the programs or under EMSSD, which I really don't support, I think we would really lose that program interest and program support that is really crucial, particularly during a response. The knowledge and the reach back into the programs during a response is really critical to the timeliness of our ability to respond. In terms of the other conclusions, I kind of need to go back and look through everything. I agree that we probably do need a clearer mission, a clearer vision. One of the other things that I think we really need to do a much better job of defining is what our role is during the majority of the time when we are not responding, when we are preparing to respond. Because there is a lot of work that is done during preparedness that supports response, and it's not just the networking, the exercising, the training, planning. There is just an incredible amount of work that we're not recognizing and seeing, and it doesn't have a really good visibility. Those are things that I really think we need to have a much better understanding of. Again, I'd really like to thank the Orange team. I think the information that was presented is going to be very valuable for ESF 11. I think that it's something that we needed to have documented, and I think it's a great start to where we need to be moving ESF 11 within APHIS as well as within the interagency and helping it move forward. Ron, Yuan, do you have anything to say? Do we know if Ron's on?
I'm not sure if he is, Ms. Lauder. We'll pause for a second to see if he responds. If not, we'll go ahead and move to the executive coach, which is Ms. Jones.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go ahead, folks, and transition. Ms. Jones, if you're with us, she's the executive coach for the Orange team. So, Bethany?
Thanks, Craig. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, sorry. Well, I just want to say congrats to the Orange team. I really enjoyed working with you all through this process. It really was a good experience to watch how you progressed over the months, everything from just watching you all get to know each other at first to kind of tackling the project itself, going through all the challenges, and then midstream kind of having to reevaluate and reassess what you would need to do to cross the finish line. I think as a group and individually, I was really impressed. You talk a lot about adaptability. It's not easy to have expectations around a project and what was to be delivered and have to have that turned upside down, especially midway through. I think what you all went through ended up being a great example and certainly reflective of real life in APHIS, that you always really need to be prepared to adapt quickly to changing priorities, needs, situations. So hopefully you learned from this. Sorry. Cold is killing me. I also think that you all demonstrated good leadership throughout the project, again, as individuals and as a group. I think individually it was good to see how you all stepped up into leading roles when you needed to, no matter whose turn it was, I guess, to take charge. And you really all, when you needed to be heard on a project, you did that, yet you were able to seamlessly kind of regroup and work as a team to accomplish your project. I think that, to me, is a sign of a great leader. Someone who can step in, step out in front when needed, but can also work well with others and support their teammates, and that you were able to focus more on the results than yourselves. You really had great synergy and work really well together. And I think it was also impressive to see how you turned your written results or report into this presentation. I thought that was impressive, and how you pretty seamlessly transitioned your pieces and kind of were able to make it all into one effective presentation. And lastly, just want to say I look forward to continuing to work with each of you going forward. Feel free, contact me, whether as LPA deputy or just as a colleague. My door is always open, and I look forward to seeing great things about you all. Congrats.